My name is Varun. I'm a first year like a resident at Columbia University. Yeah, I've done research for a while. I like kind of started sort of serendipitously in like bone tissue engineering in undergrad. And it was very basic. It was like a biomedical engineering lab at my alma mater, Rutgers. And then I had always kind of thought about med school, but really like my research experience, like thinking about like, problems and like ways to kind of like make them better and it's like, provide solutions. It's kind of the reason like a lot of people go into ortho is because like you like to provide solutions and fix problems rather than just kind of deal with them. And I think research is like a kind of fun and creative way to think about that kind of stuff. And so I did like a summer research program during undergrad at Sinai, and I didn't realize there was this whole career track of like being a physician scientist, and I thought that was really kind of fun and interesting. And so I matriculated at Sinai and did my MD PhD there, and was toying with other specialties. I think like when you start medical school, you're exposed to so much and you have like this preconceived notion of what you think you might want to do. And I think you go into medical school, you keep trying to keep an open mind. And I kind of somehow came back to ortho as being like this thing I was interested in for a lot of the same reasons where it was number one, there's a lot of like the collegiality and things like that where I kind of like vibed with, but I like the idea of you having a problem and you have like a good solution to fix it and sort of like the there's a lot of like emphasis like in innovation and like pushing the boundary with like new either devices or biologics and stuff like that. So I really like that, and it was just kind of like my background in sort of development and deformity and things like that I got really interested in. So I joined a lab at Sinai that sort of studied like I mentioned that like I had a background like bone tissue engineering, so a lot of like stem cell work, and so there's a lab where they were doing sort of development and stem cell stuff, and kind of switched tracks a lot in terms of my research. I started studying like immunology in the context of tissue healing and things like that, but it was really a development lab, and I kind of really enjoyed the idea of like development and deformity and orthopedics as well, and so as I continue my research and like now I a lot of the same sort of tools and stuff like that I studied I used during my PhD I kind of apply into like a new problem studying sort of like the role of like soft tissue growth changes in and skeletal deformities that kind of have like big problems they cause like big problems in like kids. So I guess in undergrad really started sort of randomly in like this one space, but it sort of like developed naturally based on my like my interest into this sort of like space of like soft tissue roles and develop and deformity. Yeah, I think to be like doing research and doing clinical work at the same time is really challenging. It's really hard to kind of find time and space to do both. Especially like surgical residents. We work a lot, and it could definitely be challenging to do some of that work. I think the basic science work is definitely valuable. Like there's a lot of things that we just don't understand, and I think the clinical research is extremely valuable, and it kind of like is like the ground truth of like we know to be real, and like there's a lot of sort of clinical evidence that points to certain things, right? Like we know, for example, in the things that I study in terms of like neuromuscular contractures and deformities, so there's a lot of clinical evidence that guides like kind of the clinical gestalt of what we know, but there's a lot of gaps missing in sort of like the biology of like what's causing stuff. And I think, the basic science understanding of a lot of disease is really behind a lot of the clinical expertise that we know. And part of the problem there is that you it's hard to kind of think about like out of the box or new sort of like treatments and solutions if you don't have like that understanding. And then we think about like, soft tissue injuries like tendinopathies and tendon injuries and stuff like that. People do like PRP or corticosteroid injections and all sorts of things. And, there's a lot of clinical studies that kind of have support things here and there. You try one thing or the other. But we don't really have a good understanding of like the underlying biology of like tissue healing and injury responses and stuff like that. That was all my PhD, but because of that, it's really hard. You're kind of like it's like a, chicken and the egg sort of thing where, you're trying different treatments, but you don't have a really good understanding of the biology. We just have like these clinical research. And so you kind of need both because clinical research sort of like sets the framework of what's important, and it kind of helps you validate some of the biology stuff, but you also need that basic science work to kind of um, that hypothesis-driven research where you're trying to sort of understand, the mechanisms that are involved, so then you can kind of be more targeted with your treatments. And so like that same sort of like framework is really important in all sorts of aspects of orthopedics. And I think, that's kind of where I've been really interested in is like the basic science research. It can be very challenging to kind of balance those things when you're doing like and for me in like medical school and grad school, that was one thing. And now like being a resident, doing research projects and also like, like I'm on call right now. It can be challenging, but it's very rewarding. Yeah, so 5 years, I guess I'd be in fellowship. Ideally, I think I want to do hand, so like a hand fellowship of some sort. And then, 10 years, ideally, have started to be more, I think have my practice be more like not settled, but more like a little bit more mature and not so that in the beginning it's very difficult to like establish your practice. And so I think it'd be nice to, that to be a little bit more stable. And then also with, the research, a part of the reason I did a 6-year research track and my PhD as well is so that I kind of have a sort of research program or foundation that I can build off later on. And so hopefully by then I'd have like, some sort of NIH funding that I would be able to support myself to kind of pursue the research that I'm interested in. I kind of already started that process, by doing the whole research year and have sort of developed like a foundation. So, that should help with that. But that, obviously trying to do all of that at the same time when you're a junior attending can be very, very challenging. So it's nice that I've been able to work on that now. Yeah, I mean, I think there's like awards and stuff like that, which I think are less um like they're nice in the moment. They're kind of like I think they recognize the work that went and stuff, but personally it's a lot of the things that don't necessarily get recognized that I think are really like I think about as like rewards, like when you do research you have to kind of be a little bit you have to take risks and you also have to take strategic risks. And when those things pay off, it's really, really rewarding. That things work out. And back when I did my PhD, like the first set of experiments I did to really sort of see if like my project was going to work, like and those ended up working out. And being very like thoughtful about that stuff. I think I'm very proud of that kind of stuff and like setting up a model. And I think now I'm like really proud of the fact that like my project is now like like there's another graduate student's kind of taking it up and kind of made it her own project, and it's kind of like nice to see it live on its own. And I'd be curious to see like where it goes from there, because it's like one thing when you have a project but then you leave and then it's like your kind of baby, and then somebody else takes it up, and it's really nice to see where they take it. So that's been really, really rewarding. And I think right now the project I'm working on, there's been a lot of people that have been interested in it and like willing to work with you, and it's really kind of fun and exciting to see other people get excited about your work. And I think that is really rewarding. And also like, I presented the work at a conference, and then part of the thing that's nice about doing like more translational work and being I guess like a physician scientist is that patients come up and they have like their own stories. And so I presented my work at a conference, and there's a patient CP who came up to me and we had like a nice conversation. And so like that was really, really rewarding too. So outside of like those things I think are more meaningful than like, some of the like getting grants or whatever. Because the kind of like that's part of the job. But I think the those like sort of other things I think sit with me more. Yeah, I think research it's really it's tough because a lot of research is basically troubleshooting. Like the job is just constantly troubleshooting. Things never go the way you intend them to go, and for a variety of reasons. Like, the manufacturer stops making the thing that you've been using, and now you have to go to a different manufacturer that makes it just slightly different, and that kind of throws a wrinkle and everything, right? Or, you were trying to, I spent like 8 weeks during my, or like maybe like eight, 8 or 12 weeks during my PhD just trying to optimize like this RNA extraction thing because you get so few cells. And just getting so defeated. And it finally ended up working. But like that was just a tool to like that wasn't like an important thing, right? Like the important thing was like just designing the experiment and then like just doing the analysis. We want to do RNA-seq on these cells, but it took like, a long time to just optimize that stuff. And like that's just like a one-liner in like the methods, right? But that took such a long time. It was painful. And there's a lot of these sort of setbacks that happen. And a lot of research is just troubleshooting, like, you're submitting a grant and then it goes back and forth with all these people who have to review it and there's deadlines and so on and so forth. And um, it just takes a lot of like I think people can get really frustrated and burnt out and quit early on, but like that's part it's like it's normal. I mean the frustrating parts of it are normal. And just like persevering through it. It kind of and then asking people for help is really important. So talking to like, near peer mentors or your advisors about their experiences and then talking to other people and then telling you like that happens to them too. I think kind of helps you feel like, everybody kind of goes through it and it's normal. And then when you get through all that stuff and you get to actually do the research and like see the result and see the new thing for the first time, I think it's like really, really rewarding when you like do something that you kind of believe in. And like you don't have to, I mean, it's not about you believing in it, like the results are, real. I think it's like really, really exciting. And then when other people get excited about it, I think it's like really, really, it's really rewarding. So yeah, I think, knowing that, the frustration is like, that part is part of it is normal is I think helpful. And it's something that like, now I know, and now when I talk to like young students or whatever, we like I always I share like my own failures and stuff like that, so that they know that like that's part of it. Because sometimes you see, PIs or you see other people and like they're whatever, they're like successful, whatever, and you see like their R01s or you see like, all the papers they have, and it looks like they've just been kind of like been successful this whole time, right? But the reality is that's not the truth. The reality is that like you just see like the 10 successes over like the 100 failed attempts. And part of and science is like that's part of the process and it's very normal. In fact, 10 out of 100 is probably really good odds. It's just part of that tinkering process. And that's why when things work, it's so rewarding to see that it actually works.